Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of C Jam Blues by request. It's all about chords today. Hey guys, thanks for joining me today. Before we get started with the lesson on C Jam Blues Part 2, the chords, I want to let you know that the teaching material for this lesson, meaning the PDFs, are available exclusively on my Patreon page. So please check it out. Consider joining or subscribing to Patreon. That's where I put all my swing jazz ukulele, the gypsy jazz ukulele, my arrangements, etc. And also, of course, a lot of guitar music. Gypsy jazz, solo guitar, bossa nova, theory stuff, etc. I basically put all of my teaching material, my ideas, my concepts, my arrangements out there for you, and I hope that you consider joining it. I appreciate it. Okay, so let's get started here on part 2. Today is all about chords. It's really a C blues, 12-bar blues in C. So the very first round on that opening sequence there, I did what I showed you the last lesson, part 1, where I mainly went over the melody. So I'm going to review that with you. It's C7. These are just the chord shapes. I hope again that you have the PDF. There's F7, the 4 chord, back to C7, and then G7. Okay, that's of course not in order, but let me play it and yell out the chord names. And again, hopefully you know these shapes. These are just inversions of a dominant 7th chord. Essentially, there's just 2 of them used in this particular route. This is another big study, is to eventually learn all 4 of your dominant 7th chord inversions. I'll have a specific video just dedicated to that in the future. But just to maybe demonstrate that, here's C7, here's C7, here's C7, here's C7, and then we're back to C7 up here. Okay, so it's nice to know your 4 inversions of the dominant 7th chord. In this case, for that first route that you saw me do, I'm just using 2 different inversions. Here's C7, 4 bars. This is the simplest version of it. And then F7, 2 bars, back to C7 for 2 bars. G7, it looks like that F7 shape, and then that was 2 bars, back to C7 and G7 as a turnaround, back to the top. Okay, good, so I hope you got that down. That's pretty much the basic, which is great. That's very important to get down. And by the way, the swing style that I'm just doing a light thumb feel. Later on I might get excited and put in my index finger and start to make it louder and crisper, but just for a nice background type of a swing accompaniment, I like my thumb a lot. It has a nice soft brushy sound. Okay, that's the basic. Now the second time around I'm using a 13th chord on the C7 chord, and that's a 13, by the way, is just a 6th degree added on. So here's your C7, here's the 5th, the G, you want to add on the A, and now you have C13. It's really colorful, very big band style, so it sounds like this. You can even kind of add it on with your basic C7 bar chord. So you could do this. Okay, you can mix it up. I'm not strict with that pattern or anything like that, even though it does sound kind of like a boogie woogie thing like this. Okay, but we won't go into that right now. So now on measure 4, I did put an augmented chord, and what that means is you take the 13, which, remember, that's a 6th degree, and then you flat the 6, which now this can also be called a sharp 5, and that's why it's called a C7 augmented. Okay, we're sharping the 5. And that's a beautiful chord to put on measure 4, just to lead us to the F9 chord. Okay, I know before I did F7, but now I chose to do F9 to hip it up a little bit. Okay, and that's created, by the way, by taking the F7, the basic shape here, and taking the F, and going up a whole step to the G, and now you have the 9. So again, you take the 8 and you go up a whole step, you have a 9, F9. Okay, this is again route number 2 on the sheet here, and then back to C13. And then this is still relatively simple. G9 instead of just G7, same thing, but I did add on the 13. Okay, so now what's the 13 again? You take your 5th and you go up a whole step. Okay, then you got the 6, or it's called a 13 when you're on a dominant chord. And again, I kind of pretty liberally add on and subtract that 13. Okay, and then we resolve it back to C13, and then back to G as a turnaround chord, G9. But not only that, I hipped it up by adding in a sharp 5. Okay, we just talked about that, the augmented. But it's a 9 chord now with an augmented. I know this all may seem new for you, but you'll get it with practice and understanding some of your theory. Please check out if you're on my Patreon page, go to my theory section and find the chord construction. I have it all mapped out there on the theory pages. Okay, let's do route number 3. So route number 3, we still are using the C13, okay, for the first measure. But now we're doing a quick change on measure 2. We're going to F9, and then we're doing F sharp diminished, 7, okay? And I'll do that again, F9 to the F sharp diminished 7. And notice that can also be called C diminished 7. As you hopefully know by now by watching many of my videos, the diminished 7 chord can have 4 different names. It's the same chord. It could be called C diminished 7, or F sharp diminished 7, or A diminished 7, or E flat diminished 7, because it's the only 7th chord that if you take those 4 notes and you go in a minor third apart, meaning 3 frets on the uke, it just inverts itself. So that's the easiest way to think about it. And if you actually did the work and checking out all 4 of those notes each time, you would see that they're the same 4 notes over and over. And again, that's probably a whole nother separate lesson that I have yet to do just on that. So, but the material is on there on Patreon again if you want to know about the diminished substitution trick. Okay, so that's a sub there, and then we're going back to C13. Okay. And then now, finally, something a little bit different here. We're going to the 3 chord, E minor 7, and then I'm turning that to an E diminished 7, and that's the sub for A7. Again, here's A7, but I didn't choose to do that. I chose to just make it the diminished substitution trick. And then D minor 7, I'm adding on the 9 for color, and then I diminish that, and that's to create a 2-5, 2-5, and then the 1. So I'm going to play that for you, that sequence. Okay, so route number 4 is very similar to route number 3. Of course, you'll see where it changes. There's some more action happening in there with some chromatic movement. But let's walk you through it. C13, full measure. Then the 4 chord, F9 to F sharp diminished 7, quick change, back to C13. And then right here, we're going to lead us to the 4 chord by doing a 2-5-1, G minor 11, fancy name, and then C7 sharp 5 to the F9. And that's a good little trick. It's really fun and actually easy to play. G minor 11, and see the PDF again for the explanation of that. C7 sharp 5, F9. Full measure, F sharp diminished 7. And don't forget you can even slide that around. Okay, but be careful, you don't want to end up in no man's land. You gotta know where you're going after that. So it's nice just to move it around pretty close by. And then here's where it varies from number 3. Is I do a chromatic walk down. C13, B13, B flat 13, and A13. Let's do that together. It's 2 beats each. Okay, then I slide that same shape up. Notice I'm keeping that fingering the same, like, and then to the D13, G13, G9 sharp 5, and then on back to C13 for the turnaround, and I do this cool substitution. It's called tritone substitution. I go up 3 frets, okay, and I'm playing E flat 13, D13, D flat 13, which is a substitute for G7, and then back to C. That turnaround is this. That even makes a great intro. So again, that could be totally chromatic, and that's kind of how I like to do it. C13, E flat 13, D13, and then D flat 13, which is a substitute for G9. Of course, I'm playing G7 sharp 5. You're going to see that they have these common tones. The flat 7 and the 3 are the common notes, and that's why the tritone substitution works so well. Okay, so that was route number 4. Let's do the final one, route starting to have a lot of fun. So the last thing I want to show you is just a nice substitute on a G9 chord or G7 chord. That's going up to this shape. It's a sus. I do this. Please check out my Dream a Little Dream solo uke video if you haven't already learned that version that I wrote out. But I use this little trick, which is a really nice sound. It's basically a G9 sus4 to a G9. And I use that as a turnaround. So if we have the D13, D7 sharp 5, and then I go straight to the G9 sus4 and that. And it just creates this nice little movement. And then C13, and then my little ending lick. And that you've probably learned from the first part 1 video. So thanks guys for joining me today. Part 3 will be all about improvisation, and I hope this really opens some new ideas on some chords. You get some new licks and tricks and some new shapes to use. We'll see you next time. Appreciate it. 1, 2...